All right, we should be live. Let's confirm. There it goes.
Well, I'm really pixelated.
All right. So we should be up and going. Good morning, everyone. Steven, what's going on? How do I join the Discord? I will, if someone I can't actually, maybe David, if you can pop a link to it in the stream, because if I switch out from the recording, it will show you all kinds of crazy things. So I'm sure someone can pop a link to the Discord and invite in there for you. There's also a link in the description. Yes, thank you, Jared. So yeah. So good morning, guys. So obviously, we'll notice that Bob is not here. Unfortunately, he has COVID, so he is not feeling well. So wish him the best, getting better, and um, hope he feels better. But we are joined by a special guest. We've got David joining us today, aka may know him from the server, Orion. He is one of our Patreon members, so definitely thank you for your support. We greatly appreciate it, just like all of our patrons, and really awesome to have you on the show today. I remember when you joined us about a year ago. I remember specifically you're like, I want to win tournaments. Like, I want to get better and win tournaments. And just watching you progress over the last year, get better and higher placings, and doing so well. It has been really awesome to watch. So to get started, I guess David, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you come to Templars, and that what was that journey like so far for you?
Sure. Well, I thank you for the invite. I really mean that. Plausible nature is a big reason why I'm at where I'm at in terms of my gameplay. I've been playing all the way since ninth edition, so I can't be able to say that joke once 10th is released.
Yep.
So I started about a year ago. I wasn't a stranger to tabletop games, but I had been about 20 years separated from table tournament games. So I knew the mentality to get into the competitive nature of the game, and so I just kind of followed that. But early on, it was my first time playing this game, or really playing this and learning it, was actually at Atlantic City Open. I went and got my army, I got it painted, and I'm going to learn this game at a GT. Very naive of me.
Just jump right in with 2 feet.
But to 2 feet, that's like if I get one win, I'll be happy. I walked away with two, so I was very happy.
Nice.
I met Ogden there. He had me jump on to Desert Glory. But back to you guys. I remember, not just for that GT, but driving towards RTTs to get better at this game, listening to your guys' channels, especially on like best stratagems, deployment. I know we're going to talk about that today. Great strategy for certain armies. I really attribute the content you guys created, you and Bob created, to getting me caught up. And so thank you. I know we were talking before the stream started. You guys are the exclusive stream for our content creators for Black Templar.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that what you guys focus on. So you guys do a great job of supporting the community. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what we set out to do is, create a community of players, and we've really done that. I mean, it's been amazing, an amazing ride so far, and we're just getting started. I never thought that the Discord would have over 1,500 people in it. We've got 6,400 subscribers. Like that's incredible to me for like a sub faction of a sub faction. Like I mean, like we're so specific. But we kind of like it that way because we want to make sure that we're focusing on Black Templars. Like, yeah, there other content creators do create Black Templar stuff, but it's like a here and there kind of thing, you know. So they don't get the kind of in-depth analysis of how to play Black Templars, how to utilize our stratagems and our strategies and things like that. So that's what we really set out to do, and it's so great to hear that that's helps you. So we're really that's what it's all about, right? Is helping other players. We want Black Templars players all around the world to be get better at their game and things like that. So yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so when you got into 40K,
I
what
think I
made you
will.
decide
This
to
is
go ahead?
I was just saying, you gotta watch your guys' push video about 10 times, and that's the one stratagem that people hate using it. So
Yep,
I'm like, just fair warning, our stratagem, strength of conviction, and devout push.
yep, yep. That's why I make videos on it because
Uh,
people are like, how does this work? And it's like I got tired of explaining, like, you know what? We need like a tips video where we're just talking about like, here's a strategy and this is how it works, and just keep them short form content so that they're easily digestible, and especially like too in the moment, like if you're playing a pickup game with someone and they're like, I don't understand. And you're not able to, they're not understanding how you're trying to explain it. You can be like, hey, look, here, just watch this video. So,
yeah, yeah,
so yeah, Grand Enforcer says, but that is what makes you great. Your focus is one thing, and you focus on one thing and do it well. There's something to be said about being hyper specialized. Yeah. Um, so um, so yeah. The What made you decide to get into Black Templar specifically when you started 40K?
uh, typical story of a lot of 40 kids. So I was actually going to my buddy's house, Justin, and could learn how to play Battletech, and he was playing Age of Sigmar when I was there. And I'm like, okay, I've always wanted to play 40K. So let's, show me what this game is all about. And then showed me the game, fell in love. And he says, just go to a game workshop store, look around, and see what army calls out to you. And for me, I'm a huge history buff. In fact, I have a whole shelf over on my bookshelf of Crusade stuff. I've always been
Okay.
fascinated by the Crusades. I've always loved it. One of my favorite movies is Kingdom of Heaven,
Yeah.
which is a Ridley Scott movie. And so when I saw that the crusading army, I'm like, of course. And
Of course.
I love props. What do you call it? Props and religion, Catholic,
Yeah.
the artifacts and things like that. I always
Artifacts. Yep.
like the Indiana Jones style stuff. Like,
Yep.
yeah. So I was like, oh man, they got artifacts. This is great. So really just kind of fell in love. It was the first kit I got was actually the Primaris chaplain on a bike. It was one of the first kits I got.
It's an
One
amazing
of the first
kit.
ones I took a lot of painting. It's a great kit.
Yeah.
And then Helbrick and Grimaldus, of course. And just as many other Black Templar players. So somebody's like, okay, if you're into Black Templars, go to your first kit and watch this video. And it was Hell's Reach. And so I probably already watched it like 10 times.
Yep.
And I was hooked.
Yep. Have you read the book as well?
Not yet. No, I've not.
Oh, you got to
I
read the
have it,
book,
but I've
man.
not read it yet.
You got to read it. Because like obviously he's left out a ton. That's not, in the movie or whatever. Just because of the amount of time it was taking him, like he couldn't do everything. But yeah, the he did a great job. Definitely a different way to animate stuff. But I really liked it, and I liked how the progression of it changes over the course of the 10 episodes, or maybe it's 16. I can't remember. Um, but yeah, when I started back way back in fourth edition, so I'm old. But I picked up the fourth edition Codex. My friends, it was the same thing. My friends were like, "You should really play this game," and I'm like, "I don't know." And they're like, "Well, you like to like build models, right?" I was really big into building model cars at the time, and I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Okay." And they're like, "Do you like strategy games?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Then you need to come check out this game." And I'm like, "All right, fine." So my buddy, let me play his very nicely painted Dark Angels Deathwing, and I was playing against Space Wolves, I think, and it was just like a demo game, so it was just learning it, and I just kept picking up the models and looking at them. I'm like, these are really cool. So they're like, well, go to the store and pick out an army that you like. So I went to Hobbytown, and I remember looking through the different books, and I picked up the Black Templar Codex, and I'm leafing through it, and I started reading the Sword Brethren entry, and the line that I remember specifically reading was, uh, "They're the very image of a Baroque warrior knight," and I was like, "All right." Went to the register, purchased it, and the rest is history. Because I mean, I love King Arthur stuff. I love knights. In fact, it's like a joke amongst my friends that like, "Hey, Alex, you should play this game," and I'm like, "I got too many games." So like, they have knights. Okay, tell me more. You know, so because I just love everything knights. So that's what really drew me to them as a faction. And it was interesting to read the lore and learn that they're not knights like knights in shining armor. Like, no, these are very much zealots, and like, so learning like the grim dark of 40K was definitely something that was I was not necessarily expecting, but it was a sort of welcome adaptation to typical sci-fi. So so yeah, but definitely you got
Yeah,
to read Hell's Reach, man.
I think
It's
there's
so
an
good. Do you start with
on
Hell's
my
Reach, or are
list.
there other
I think
books
there's an
first in
alternate.
that series? Hell's Reach is technically the first in that series. It was actually like the first book that there were like short stories prior to Hell's Reach that focused on the Black Templars, but they were all very old, like third edition stuff. Hell's Reach was really the first novel that is only about Black Templars. ADB is such an amazing writer. I remember there's a line in that book that he's talking about like they're arming for battle, and he's like, the heraldic cross stands proud on my chest, where the Astartes of lesser chapters wear the emperor's aquila. He goes, we do not wear his symbol, we are his symbol. And like literally everyone on the bolter and chainsword is like carving off the aquillas on their miniatures so that they can put a cross on there. And ADB was like, I didn't mean for you to like destroy your miniatures, guys. Like, I just thought it sounded cool. We're like, no, no, you're
Yeah,
fine. You're fine. so, so yeah.
I think I was just saying, I think there's an alternative universe where I am playing 40K as long as you, because when fourth edition came out, I walked into the shop with every intention to get to 40K when that came out. But the guy who was in charge of the shop knew I was a huge BattleTech MechWarrior guy, and that's
Okay.
when MechWarrior Dark Age from WizKids had came out. And so he's like, oh, by the way, this just came out, and I know you're a MechWarrior nerd. That's where my competitive career actually had taken off around fourth edition.
Yeah. Yeah. GW, since our last video, has dropped quite a bit of content. We had a video talking about the huge article about Terminators, where they really buffed the hell out of Terminators, which I'm really excited about. We'll talk about that in a bit here. Um, so, um, we do have a couple comments. Ever thought about doing a video about a BT reading list? You know what? That's a great idea. I shall work on that because there's a lot more content now. ADB came out with a sequel to Hell's Reach, which is a shorter. It's like a novella. Um, it's called Blood and Fire. It's also really good. Then there was some stuff written by Guy Haley, which is not my favorite, but it's there. And then we have Knight of the Throne with the newest book with Helbrecht, which I still need to finish. I know it's terrible that I haven't finished that book, but um, in any case, yeah, that's uh, definitely a good idea to do a video on that. I do need to do like another like lore heraldry video too, because um, we've gotten our new supplement had a bunch more information on it where they adapted some different stuff, so I should do a video on that. Um, But in any case, yeah, back to GW just dropped a data slate, an article about the new vehicles for 10th, and an article about weapons for 10th, all in the same week. So we got a lot to talk about. So I think first let's talk about that data slate and sort of what the meta is going to look like for the end of ninth edition. Inner Circle just lost Transhuman, which is massive. And I think they were one of the few armies that we did not play well into. And we won't be seeing them in tournaments anymore. Really, it's just Iron Hands is going to be probably our toughest opponent, I think. I think that really bumps BT up in, power level for the end of this edition, and we might see, a lot of high placings for Black Templars. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. My last GT, my very first match was a guy who ended up winning the pod of the GT. He was playing Dark Angels, and I just saw him at a Cabela's in the middle of the shop. We were kind of reminiscing about how great our game was. I lost 96 to 91, so it was really close.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think they were I mean, they were in a really obviously overpowering spot, so they needed something. But I agree with you. I think this will solve Black Templars is number two. I argue that Black Templar is better than Iron because the shooty Templar list is a really strong meta, and we saw some really great showing of that. Like, what was her name? Susan. I think I might, name, but she went to top 16 at a tournament recently, and we saw her live on stream showing what a shooty Templar list could look like.
yeah.
So we'll see. I think we are due for a not just a strong finish for Black Templar, but I would suspect I wouldn't be surprised if we have a Black Templar player win a GT before the end of ninth.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. Honestly, we're more durable than Iron Hands. We're better in melee. We don't shoot heavy weapons as well as them, but we can spam impulsors and gladiators with free multi meltas on them. Which is awesome. And we have a lot of
Yeah,
great tools. And a lot of great ways to play the list, like trade lists. You can spam impulsors, you can spam infantry. Um, we do all of it very well. But Crusaders are dirt cheap for how good they are. I mean, 158 points for 10 guys with a ton of chainsword attacks and free power fists. Like, it's really good. The amount of damage output they have. They're almost like a
yeah,
solid, a decent combat unit for that price. Um, so, so
yeah. I
yeah, I think they're as
was
deadly
going
as
to
a
say something
Vanguard
else,
vet
but I
squad.
see Bob in there. I
Oh
told you I
yeah.
could say something to get him to shake his fist and try to nod.
Yeah.
Told you I'd be able to get
Well,
him to say something.
well,
No,
Bob was back in fourth and fifth edition. Um, Bob sort of went against the grain. Like, so to give some context, back then, um, the one of the rules was if you were armed with two close combat weapons, you got a extra attack. So a chainsword was a close combat weapon, obviously, and so is a bolt pistol was considered a close combat weapon. So you got an extra attack if you were bolt pistol and chainsword. So we had the option to switch out bolters for bolt pistol and chainsword, and so because of the extra attack, because we were the melee chapter, or a melee chapter, um, everyone was like, guns are bad, bolters are for cowards, like bolt pistol and chainsword all the way. And Bob sort of bucked the meta by running like a lot of shooting elements. Like you could back then take a las cannon and a plasma gun in a five-man squad. And a lot of people thought it, like, called him a heretic and whatever else because, but he had a lot of success doing it because we were a fourth edition codex in a fifth edition game, and they had changed a lot of that stuff for other space marines, but not for us because GW didn't do that back then. And so you could have a five-man Terminator squad with two Cyclone missile launchers in it. So, Shooty Terminator or Shooty Black Templars was a thing that did really well in fourth edition, and it was pretty funny because Bob caught a lot of flack for it. So,
if try to upload my I'll upload my list when I mention Templars and what I mean by that and what I'm currently running right now. But
Yeah, yeah,
back
absolutely.
to one of the things that you said, what's changed for this meta for this is, and why I think that Black had an advantage here is because we no longer can, as Space Marine players, we can no longer focus on or rely on the default 15 points from Codex Warfare. And I know it's huge for Iron Hands as well. So we have to find a way of getting points elsewhere. Um,
Yeah,
and I feel like we are better positioned for that, to go after behind enemy lines, for example, or engage on fronts, because we have the ability, if we push up infiltrators or eliminators, they can survive at least 1 or 2 turns, hitting those BLEL lines or engage points, while we're moving the rest of our army forward to finish off the game. So that's why I feel like that we're in a really great position.
yeah. And something else too that is interesting that they did a FAQ for in the Arcs of Omen GT book is are if you're able to like be in a different doctrine than what your army is in, that counts for Codex Warfare, which means that if we took accept any challenge, which when we're in engagement range would count as being in assault doctrine, you can essentially double dip Codex Warfare and be in Devastator doctrine shooting stuff and in melee killing stuff and getting points for both, which is pretty interesting. So I don't
Yeah,
know if it's
in fact,
enough. I don't know if it's
yep,
enough to be able to, warrant taking it, but it is something that I noted was interesting with that change. Same thing with Crusader Helm. Crusader Helm will also do that for you. Um,
yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think
The Crown's a big part of the list. Favorite staple.
what's that?
Crusader Helm, uh, favorite staple of my now is actually in my current GT list. You're right. I don't think there's enough. If you're looking at the army, like if you're playing against, like, I think Gene's, for example, or some heavy horde army, I could see an argument to taking Codex Warfare still. But unfortunately, I think there's just better options, because then you have to kill, what is it, 15 units in a doctrine to
Yeah,
get to max it out, and that can be pretty tough.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm using Codex War, or not Codex Warfare, Crusader Helm in my my trade list that I've been running, and I like it a lot because it lets me get that extra pip of AP because until the guns that are you know, heavy in my list are dead, I am staying in Dev Doctrine because I've got a couple impulsors. I've got, an Invictor in there. And having the extra AP on like the Iron Hail Heavy Stubbers, making them AP2, really great at clearing like guard and horde stuff because you just deny a save entirely. Same thing with the multi meltas. And there's a gladiator Valiant in there as well. So making those things AP4 and AP5, those guns, shoots really well into guard because you're just flat out denying a save at all. With their two
Yep,
plus save, and then once that stuff gets whittled down, I'll start moving doctrines. But the Crusader Helm lets me pick a unit that gives me gives me an extra pip of AP in melee, and also that the chaplain that it's on has exhortation of rage and canticles of hate, so it gives me a huge bubble of canticles of hate, or litanies of hate if I decide to use that instead. Um, so yeah,
yep,
it's definitely a really good relic right now for us.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think my favorite synergy right now, using that, is not just putting something in a assault doctrine, but slingshotting something forward very quickly, deceptively quickly. I'll usually run Terminators in, uh, Death or above, of course. And then if especially in turn 3 or 4, if it's a critical unit on their side that's exposed, or I need it to die, I'll pop the Terminators, right by, my chaplain. Hopefully he'll have his canonical, you have the CP to bombastic delivery to make sure the Canticus goes off.
Yep.
I get the litany of hate off as well, and then I've got a charge instead of a 9-inch charge against, and with rerolls. against a very important target. I do that quite a bit in my games. And
Yeah.
I got Terminators they have to deal with in their on their front line. Then
Yep. Yeah, I've been deep striking my 2 5-man Terminator squads with my trade list as well. Um, Hilariously, my Vanguard Vet squad nearly single-handedly, well, did single-handedly punch a big knight to death. It was mainly the Champion of the Feast guy. I think the Lightning Claws plinked off a couple wounds, but he had Canticles of, or Litany of Hate and Exhortation of Rage, and he did a total of like 17 wounds by himself to that night.
I can believe it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is
it's
hilarious.
always
My
nice when
dude was
all
like,
those
"What?"
synergies go off at once.
Yeah, my opponent was like, "What? Like, he did how many wounds?" I'm like, "Yeah, they're 3 damage each." He's like, "Well, he's
Yep.
dead. Let's see if
Yeah.
he explodes." I'm like, "Okay." So,
Yep.
so yeah. I
It
think,
reminds me of one of the first videos.
yeah.
That reminds me of the first video I hooked to your channel. Now I'm reminded of it is your guys' interview with Austin.
Oh yeah.
He was talking about fishing for sixes,
Mhm.
and now that's become my absolute favorite. Synergy against big targets, especially big knights. Roll up with I run Crusader squads with 7 neophytes, a pretty big winner points. But then you go in there and you've got fires of devotion going off, you got litany of hate, and then you just pop that gene rot might, and all of a sudden they're like, "Am I taking? I'm
Yeah.
taking,
36 auto wounds.
28 against my nut."
Yep. Have fun
So
rolling all those dice. And
wow,
especially if you like put them in, Salt Doctrine, now that knight is saving on fives. So,
yeah,
which is hilarious.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. They're like, "Oh yeah, chainsaws. You're still gonna only wound on fives." I'm like, "No, I'm gonna fish for sixes with this gene rot. Can I see that card?"
yeah, it's a good one. Auto wounds is a powerful mechanic, which looks like we'll be able to get for free with an attached lieutenant in 10th edition. That's pretty
Huge.
interesting, and especially since we have our own special lieutenant. I imagine we'll be able to attach him to Crusader squads and Sword Brethren with free auto wounds, with all power weapons will be pretty gross. Um, they're also probably going to get +1 attack because that seems what we're getting rid of shock tactics, and it's just going to be, or not shock tactics, shock assault, and it's just going to be just +1 attack like Chaos Space Marines basically have. So, so yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see. Attaching lieutenants to units or characters to units in general. It's definitely a huge departure from what we're currently used to. How do you feel about it?
I'm excited. I actually love the power of lieutenants, especially Dreadless they use that includes a lieutenant. It's one of those I wish I had, but I don't have the point to squeeze out. Like points is just such a premium at a GT list, especially.
Yeah,
You don't want to spend them on a lieutenant, but you really wish you could.
I know
So I
they're so
still have my
cheap. It's like
dread list.
65 points, and it's like it's like I want to fit
But
him
then
in
you're
here,
when you're
but I don't
min
know.
maxing,
I don't know what else I can drop. I got nothing to drop. Like so we'll have to
yeah.
see how 10th looks.
So now, yeah, now our hand's going to be forced to enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I'm hoping that they keep at least a similar loadout option because right now I've discovered, and I think this is humorous, we can actually, because of the way the new Lieutenant datasheet works, we can actually create a lieutenant with, or a castellan, I guess, with a power fist, a chainsword, and a autoplasma, which just sounds like fun. Because
Yeah,
we meet the
yeah,
criteria. Like if you don't have, I forget what it is. It's like a power fist or a power sword already. You can take a power fist, so you can just take a power fist on top of his already loadout gear, which is funny. So I
yeah.
was gonna build one, but I'm actually gonna wait until 10th rolls around and see if that's still an option. Because I don't want to build a mini and then have it be useless. So, or have to rip it apart. So yeah. Um, it's
I'm a fan of
the
magnetizing.
No. And I'll tell you
I
why.
get it.
There's quite a few, like there's some stuff I have magnetized. Like I have 10 relic terminators, and I magnetized their um, melee arm. So chain fists or lightning claws. Um, the but the thing is like for me mostly, like especially with like um, more spindly parts like power swords and things like that, right? That stick up everywhere. I prefer that they're just in a cool pose all the time and not like, oh, I accidentally knocked it and now his like sword is like woo, like weird looking, you know what I mean? Like so that's sort of my philosophy is I prefer to just have static poses on models, and generally speaking, I'll just buy more models if I need to. So yeah, although, potentially magnetizing something like Vanguard vets, makes sense, because they have so many different options and it changes constantly. But I can foresee GW. I think they've sort of hinted that they're doing away with, like we've already seen, like there's no power sword, power axe, power maul anymore. It's just power weapon, which I actually like a lot, because axes and mauls look cool, but they're just terrible. Like, I mean, axes are okay,
Yeah.
but being able to like freely model cool knightly looking weapons on, our sword bros and stuff like that, will be nice and not have to worry about the rules. I really appreciate that they're doing that, and I'm glad they went that route because I just don't want. I want to model cool stuff. I don't want to have to worry about the rules for it, and it simplifies it too.
Yeah. I sure hope so because I don't know if you've worked on any sprues for any new models outside of our army, especially Votan. My buddy plays Votan. We were looking at it when it came out, and even World Eaters looking at some of those sprues. They almost are designing sprues to be anti-magnetized, like the put on the wrist looks like this instead of flush.
Right.
So there's a lot of less. There's less flush segments and more of these coupled segments. And it's like, oh yeah, you guys really don't like magnets.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm tinfoiling that a little bit, but if they continue to go that route, I'm fine with it. But allow us to follow the rule of cool more than hey, what you see is what you get.
Yeah. Well, and I like that a lot. I know a lot of people don't like it. This is a bit of a controversial topic. I think that there's a lot of people that are upset that GW is moving to a what's in the box mentality. Like you can only build what's in the box. It's like why we only have one dude with a lightning claws in a 5-man sword bro squad because that's all that's in the box. Um, And honestly, I like it because I came from an edition, when I started 40K, where it's like, oh, you want a 4 multi-melta Devastator squad? Cool. You got to buy 4 boxes because only one comes in a box. And that's terrible for a
Yep.
new player. Like, it's like, oh, yeah, this optimal loadout that we're telling you to run, you need like 2 or 3 more boxes of the same squad, or you got to go find bits and pay extra money, versus you can just build this squad, straight out of the box, exactly what you need for the optimal build and not have to worry about it. So I like that a lot. You know, for those of us who have like a huge bits box of stuff because we've been playing for 20 years, like, it doesn't, it, it's whatever. Like we've got those resources, but new players don't have that. And with the price of the game and
Yeah.
how expensive everything is, we want, if we want to drive new players to the game, you gotta make it more accessible. So I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it, I do too. I think that you're starting to see a theme here, and if you're not already on board, cut straight to it. Is that they're definitely this game extremely approachable to new people to not just tabletop, but new people to 40k. And you see the news that Henry Cavill going to do it with Amazon. You're seeing like these social media campaigns for like app games or new video games. So it's becoming injected, forced injection to mainstream. When I got buddies of mine that I wouldn't even genuinely surprised texting me like, "Hey, tell me a little bit more about because I know you're into it." And they're so far divorced from tabletops, let
Yeah.
alone getting into. You're seeing this injection in the mainstream, and now they need a way of saying, "Hey, by the way, our game is not complicated. It's not expensive. It's not complicated." And so the 10th edition is that hard reset where you don't have to spend a ton of money. You don't have to spend 1 year finally getting to a point where you're comfortable with the rules of the game.
Yeah.
It's very approachable from day one, and I think that's a very healthy game. And the most important thing is the way 10th is being structured. It's clear that they're making it much easier to expand on. They can
Mhm.
start adding things to it a little bit more seamlessly,
Yeah.
and not and still follow that simplification theme. So we could be having this conversation this time next year, and 10th edition could be in a place, in a healthy place where they can start actually adding. Okay, now you can start changing the way your models. I don't know. I'm just speculating. Or they can start adding those complications again, but in a more healthy.
Yeah, I think uh the funny thing is especially like you hear this a lot from veteran players. They're like, "Oh, well, they're not catering to their customer like, I'm a loyal customer or whatever." And it's like, "Listen, you're not the target audience, dude. People like me who've been playing for 15, 20 years, I'm not the target audience. Unless GW comes up with a shiny new model that I want, I'm not buying a lot of stuff because I have a lot of stuff. Um, New players are the target audience. And that's how they gotta grow their game, right? If you don't make it accessible for new players, then you're not going to grow your game. And another perfect example of a company making a game more accessible is Corvus Belli with Infinity the game. Infinity is a very complicated game. It has a lot of rules. It has a lot of it makes sense once you understand it, and it's very tactical and it's a lot of fun. But the amount of like rules that you have to learn as a new player is overwhelming. So they created Code One, which is a stripped down version of the same game to like get new players involved with a more simplified version of the rules and more simplified units, and then they can add that extra layer of complexity and move into the regular game afterwards. Um, so I think GW is doing the same thing, and I think initially I was really worried, when they were like, "We're gonna reset the game," going back to indexes, because I remember Eighth Edition, and Eighth Edition was like, I mean, going into eighth, it was ultimately a great change coming from seventh. Um, but the indexes were so boring and so flavorless, and you had to pay for them. And Bob pointed this out to me, and I said, I don't want that to happen again. Like, and he's like, but listen, he goes, don't forget too, this is even now a different GW than it was in eighth edition. In eighth edition, they weren't releasing data slates every quarter. They weren't doing new mission packs every 6 months. They weren't actively trying to balance the game. Which they are now. And so I was like, that's a good point. So, I think ultimately it's going to be a good thing. And the more that they've shown, like, more and more as they've shown stuff, there's stuff that feels familiar. So it's not like we're learning a whole new game, even for us veterans. Like, there's still, things still feel familiar, which, is good.
Yeah. It's interesting to watch as a new player the tonal shift from when they first hinted that they were going to use indies to continue this game into 10, and everyone kind of freaking out, me not knowing it better. But then that shift has quickly gone into excitement because it's listening to players, and still armies are still going to have their individual flavor. You're still going to have it. You still be able to separate yourself from everybody else, and while simultaneously continuing to simplify the game. So people are actually excited for these indices now. So it's a good thing. And never forget, GW is a publicly traded company, so they've got to do
They
something for
they
to
are a
continue its
miniatures company.
growth. They've got
Yep. They want to sell miniatures.
yeah,
Um,
they're Their priority is making money first.
Yeah, you could say that again. So yeah, and I didn't even just think about that till now. Is this is your first edition change. Like, I mean, I've been through like five or six, um, and so definitely it's a interesting, interesting to hear your point of view on it. Having never been through an edition change, learned the rules, and then now they're changing and changing drastically. Like eighth to ninth wasn't that big of a deal, to the point where like you pretty much we didn't really need to fac much from eighth edition into ninth edition codexes, to play them in ninth. Whereas like we need to start all over with tenth because it is a reset. So so yeah, what's your favorite thing that you've seen GW reveal about 10th so far?
Uh, I don't know if I have a deck of cards here, but I loved the video where the guy's like shifting through his cards. I think I have something that can beat you. Just hold on a second. I think that's one of my favorite simplifications. I called this out in the Discord as a wish list when 10th edition rumors were popping out saying, I think you should be locked into six gems or, have the whole suite, but pick six and that's all you can bring to the table.
Yeah,
The fact that you're doing something very similar to that, I think that's really, really good. It slows the game down dramatically, but also from a new player's perspective, and I'll kind of back up. I'm at a point where I can go to a tournament now, and even once we've deployed, have confidence and know how the game is going to be. I'm at that point now. I understand ninth far enough. I understand my army, most importantly, well enough that I can just set up and know I'm going to win or lose, and then what my strategy, my game plan is. So, with that confidence, there's still a serious fog of war, only being a year in, against the unknown from the opposite player's side.
yeah,
I don't have a lot of familiarity with Jakari, for example, or there's a handful of other armies that I just AdMech I struggle with because since I don't play them often, I feel like there's got some surprises up my sleeve. So I even catch myself, even against my good friend who plays Gene Stoichels really really well. I was winning a game. In fact, he did something silly. He pulled all his models off his like on turn three for some reason. And I didn't say anything. It was a friendly game. I said something, but I was in that fog war mentality of like, do they have some sort of out of sequence movement ability that I don't know about? So I feel like still going to be in trouble here. Um, and it's something that you don't get just by watching videos. You only get that through gameplay, perpetual gameplay. So
yep,
I'm really optimistic that new players are going to go and they won't have fog of war fear or anxiety when they see an army they just never see ever because they'll be able to say, oh, larger in front of me. I can see this in front of me. And they're following a very similar formula to me. It's curated for their style. So I'm excited for that aspect.
yeah. I think even for me, I mean, I've played all through ninth. I've played all through eighth. It's still daunting. Like unless it's a regular opponent, there's still stuff that I'm like, it does what now? Right? And well, I didn't know I was going to do that. Well, that sucks. Live and learn, I guess, right? It's one of those things where you're like, I'm not sure what this unit is going to be capable of. And it's one of those things that can be challenging, especially for a new player, but even for us veteran players. Like, it's hard to learn 14 other armies and know what they're capable of unless you play against them regularly. So we've got a supers chat. Stumble Bunny says, "Didn't the Black Templars lose its own faction status between third and fourth edition? Is anyone else scared we may become watered down?" So no, actually, we got third edition. We had a Armageddon supplement, and then we got a full codex in fourth edition. We did not get a codex in fifth edition. What you're thinking of is when sixth edition launched, we were rolled into the sixth edition Space Marine Codex, and we were boiled down to basically our three unique units, which was uh, four, I guess technically: Emperor's Champion, Grimaldus, Helbricht, and the Primary and the Crusader Squad. We lost Sword Brethren in that book, and we had a chapter tactic, and that was it. Um, so um, so yeah, I think that's what you're thinking of. And no, I'm not scared. I mean, are we going to lose stuff like relic bearers and all the warlord traits and all the extra relics and things like that? I mean, yeah, that stuff is going to be pared down. GW has already said that there's going to be a short list. I think six is what they said, 3 to 6, something like that. Enhancements is what they're calling them. They're using the boarding patrol terminology for that. Um, so I'm confident that GW will, give us our own detachment with our own enhancements and our own stratagems to use. Um, is it going to be as in depth as it is right now? No, but that's sort of the point. Is GW is wanting to, sort of pare down, um, some of the rules bloat. And I mean, let's be honest. Like, there's probably maybe five stratagems out of our supplement that we really use on a regular basis. There's maybe two relics, three relics at most that we're using. There's like, I don't even know if we're really using any of our warlord traits in competitive settings. Um, Oathkeeper probably is probably the most common one because it's great on the Judiciar to get him in range with his little uh, whatever his time steal thing is, which I still don't understand how that works and how that's
Yeah.
not heresy. That seems like heresy to me. So, are we really using the full depth of what's in our book anyway? No, we're not. I think GW knows that,
Yeah.
and I think they're going to look at the ones. They've done a lot of research on army lists and on who's winning and what, and I'm sure they're looking at those army lists and going, these are the relics and the things that people are using. Um, relic bearers is something that I think is probably we use more than anything else, and they're amazing. And unfortunately, we probably will lose that. But that doesn't mean that we won't
Yeah.
get something else in return in a detachment, like special abilities and things like that. Um, so yeah.
Yeah.
And we also do know GW did point out on it was actually a Warhammer official Twitter um, that they said they responded to someone's comment. Now, obviously, this is not the rules team, but it is from GW. So, I know we shouldn't always 100% trust everything we read on Warcom, but they did say that Castellans would be getting their own data sheet for Black Templars. So they're going to have their own data sheet. It would stand to reason that so will marshals have their own data sheet, which will be
Hmm.
interesting and a change from currently. Right now, they're just add-on abilities to a lieutenant and a captain. So that'll be cool.
Yep.
We're actually going to expand the number of data sheets that we have, which makes me feel confident that they're going to do right by us.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel we're still going to have our identity really clearly on the table. When you see a Black Templar player, you're going to know, okay, that's clearly a Black Templar army. The data sheets and through the subtle thing, I'm okay giving up things like the relic bearers, which I think are, again, like you said, are critical. But if I put myself in the mind of another player, I don't want to have to remember, oh, that guy's got a Crux Obsidian, that guy's got a Fist of Balthus, that guy's got Steel of Sigismund. They don't have to want them to have to feel like I keep track of all those little relics. I also don't want to go against another army that has all these little inserted things that I need to also keep track of. So just goes with the theme. I'm not worried as well. Nope, I think you're muted.
Thank you. I had a cough, and so I muted myself, and then I forgot to unmute. Yeah, I think you're right. And Grand Enforcer says, "Will this be noted on those cards? Will our Codex supplement become a coffee table book?" Yeah, I mean, it pretty much is going to be a. Whoops. Hold on. There we go. Bit of a technical issue there. I think it pretty much is going to be a coffee table book because they're replacing it with an index. GW's goal, they've said this, is that they want your faction's rules for what you need for that game, with basically your detachment rules and your army rules, to fit on a two-sided card. I don't know how big this card is going to be, but that's what they want it to do. So that way you're not like leafing through pages of books looking for where's that, like you said. I have a thing somewhere I think that I can do that will stop you or that will help me in this situation. And you're not going to be looking like you're going to the library with 5 books and 48 pages of FAQs and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, so I mean, all this information is supposed to be on these like cards that you'll be able to buy, but they'll also be free, so you can just print them out as well. One interesting thing I think is, well, whether when they do start releasing codexes again, which will presumably have more different detachments in them, because that seems like what they're going to be going with is like the detachments is what's going to be in there primarily, like new and different detachments that you can run, and then any new units that they create, and then any tweaks to existing units where they want to like, this isn't performing exactly the way we want it to. We're going to give it a boost or whatever. Whether they're going to charge for that or if it will be also free, and if you want a hard copy, you got to pay for it. Really hoping that they make the rules part of them free. Because,
I think they are. I'm pretty sure I saw that they're still going to be free, and they have the option to buy them.
yeah, because I mean, 40K players, generally speaking, like hard copies. Um, so they're gonna buy hard copies for their books because they want the lore and the pretty pictures and all that stuff. I'll still buy a copy. So you
Yeah.
know, I'll definitely be picking up codexes as they come out in hard copy, just to not only have a physical version, but because it's the army I play, and it'll just make it easy. It'll be interesting to see though what they do, whether with the codex, whether it will come with like the cards when you buy it, or how that's going to work, or if it's just going to be a page in the book. I don't know. So, so
Well,
yeah,
I mean, they kind of set up if you buy a select wide duels, especially if it has like Age of Sigmar content, they have punch out cards that boom, you've got them right there on the spot
yeah,
before or at the same time in order. So I would suspect they'll have some pages will punch out and you'll have your card there.
yeah, could be. I mean, they've pulled a lot of stuff from different game systems they own. We see stuff that they're using from Boarding Patrol. We stuff that they're getting from Age of Sigmar. Stuff from older editions. A lot of the rules, the universal special
Yeah.
rules, are from older editions. Although it's going to be interesting because some of them have changed. So you didn't play the game then, but I remember Twin Linked used to re-roll hits. Now it re-rolls wounds.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's, I mean, it's sort of the same insofar as like the increase in your damage output, but it's less dice that you have to re-roll because you're gonna have fewer wounds. Um, but honestly, I think re-rolling wounds is really powerful because especially if you're going against something that's tougher than you, if you're trying to wound it on fours or fives, getting that re-roll is a much more significant boost than re-rolling a three that if you're hitting on threes. So that'll be
Yeah.
interesting. I really like the way that they're doing the special rules and the weapons now. That's an enormous good change because it gives them
Yeah.
a lot more flexibility um, to where the like for example like a multi-melta carried by an infantry is not going to be the same as a multi-melta, or doesn't have to be the same as a multi-melta mounted on a tank, which honestly
Right.
makes a lot of sense because half the time when you look at the models, the multi-melt on the tank is huge, or the las can on the tank is huge, and it's like much smaller on the infantry guy, and that'll make sense that it has more power. It's a much bigger gun. It never made sense that it was always the same. So, so yeah.
Yeah.
Octo Goblin says, as long as all chapters get the same treatment, I'm happy. It sucked not getting a supplement when other chapters did in previous editions. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have to worry about that. I think we're gonna be just fine. Um, GW, and I've been saying this on the Discord. When did our book came out? Like a year and a half ago, something like that, I want to say. Um, and
Yeah,
GW,
because it was November.
yeah, 2021, right? Yeah, so about a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
They didn't they didn't release a slew of new models for Black Templars, including an upgrade kit, just to lump us in again. Like they're not going to do that. They want to sell models, so I think we're going to be just fine. Um, I think they've realized that Black Templars are have a pretty big player base, and that they're not going to be concerned with. I don't think we need to be concerned with getting the rules that we really
yeah,
deserve.
yeah, I'm not worried. Bob asked, how does one prep for 10th edition? Do I buy stuff? Do I sell stuff? I don't want to wait till 10th to start help.
Those
uh,
are all good
I was talking to
questions.
my. This, that is a really good question. I will say I've stopped stuff to the chagrin to my local gamer shop. A place in Jim Thorpe, the Road Trader. I know the owner really well, Noah, and I texted him the other day. It's like I'm not anything else until 10th comes out,
Yeah,
and he's sent me a frowny face, of course. Um, I just don't see a reason to try to speculate on purchases. I think you'll have buyer's remorse very quickly if you do that. On the side, uh, yeah, I think it's too early to say what's going to be really good than our staples. So I'd flush out
yeah,
our staples more. Make sure you have plenty of tanks. It's clearly you're going to want to make sure you have plenty of tanks. And then I think we're going to find out in the next update. Really, we're going to want to have select transports as well if you don't already own those. So um, do speculation buying. Go based on the updates. Oh, great! If I don't have gladiators, clearly I'm going to need some gladiators. By the way, you're living on a rock if you don't already own gladiators at this point,
yeah.
based on the gladiator changes the arcs. But
They're so
by the
good.
way, I do know that there's players. They are really good, but I do know there's players that just did tanks because for the most part in ninth edition they just weren't feasible. I would say one thing we haven't talked about at all, and we haven't seen in any of the updates, is I want to see if they'll make Redemptor Dreadnoughts competitive because they're my favorite model by far. I own six of them, I think, including a Leviathan. Love Dreads because I'm a huge BattleTech fan, but they're just under the competitive, I think,
Yeah,
threshold. I'd like to see what they do to put the forefront because I want to play with the big
they're
toys.
they're a little too fragile now, and everybody's scared of
Yeah.
them, so they get hyper focused on in games.
Yep.
Um, so I think that's what sort of pulled them out of our staple lists, because I love dreadnoughts too. I bought two Brutalises because I was like,
Yep.
they're cool. And I've seen a lot of people having great success with the Brutalis because it moves 10 inches, and people are just not expecting this dreadnought to suddenly be, in their face. Um,
And its
so
core.
yeah, and its core. So yeah, I would love to see that. I think dreadnoughts are going to get a boost in toughness, just like all the other vehicles are, and make them more durable. Things that are supposed to be durable are going to be more durable, and lethality is going down in the game overall, which is a good thing. So, so yeah.
Yeah.
So Black Sword asks, Aspect Tactics just released a video speculating on transport restrictions based on Primaris Firstborn going away. If that occurs, what do you think the potential for Land Raiders to come back? I think it's going to depend on the Land Raider itself. We've already seen repulsors are tough 12. There's no reason to think that a Land Raider will not also be tough 12, because they're both tough 8 right now. Land Raider will have a better save. It's going to depend. So, Land Raider Crusaders, which of course are our favorite, we know it has a twin linked multi or not multi assault cannon. We already seen what twin linked does, so we can expect it to be 6 shots, strength 6, AP 0, with devastating wounds and 1 damage each. um, which is kind of a, it's definitely a downgrade. But again, lethality is going down across the board for all factions. So it's not just us. I'll be interested to see what they do with hurricane bolters. Because hurricane bolters are right now rapid fire
Mm.
6. It'll be interesting to see, like we've already seen bolt rifle. The bolt rifle change I think is amazing. Um, giving you the versatility to just stand here and shoot hitting on twos, to move and still fire normal ballistic skill whatever, and to advance and still be able to shoot. So a lot of versatility with the bolt rifles. We'll have to see what they do with bolters, because that'll inform us on what hurricanes are going to look like. But they could do anything. They could make them rapid fire. They could make them heavy. Who knows what they're going to do. So we'll just have to wait and see. Land Raiders, whether they're viable or not, is going to depend greatly on points, um, I think, and you know whether we really still need to be able to move our troops across the board. But putting Primaris in a Land Raider Crusader, I think it's going to be a thing, because they heavily hinted at it in the last article where they're like, why shouldn't aggressors be able to ride in Land Raiders? So I think that the keyword differential is going away, and we'll be able to slap a 10-man Crusader squad in a Land Raider Crusader and attach a couple characters and go to town, which will be fun. We'll have to see, how good they come out of the gate, and how durable they are. I think they're going to know that we're going to see a market increase in their durability, which is one of their big problems right now. Is it's just too easy to shoot them off the board. Like a railgun can almost kill one in a single shot. So, stuff like
Yeah.
that um, will be uh, will be interesting to see. Um, I think we'll expect a stat line similar to repulsors, only with a 2+ save. But as far as its guns, we'll just have to wait and see what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, Bob, if you want to purchase anything between now and 10th, I think Land Raider Crusader, if you don't already own one, I know it probably has one, but for anybody else, and I think it goes with the theme. Like we wanted tanks on the table, we weren't seeing them. GW fixed them so that
Yeah,
we're seeing tanks on the table now.
yeah,
We didn't see transports on the table very often. Now we're seeing impulsors on the table more often. So I think they're leaning into this. Hey, we've got cool toys to putting them on the table. I think the transports are going to be the next on deck where they're like, okay, there's a real genuine reason to bring transports. Because I think the only group that's genuinely happy with the current transport situation is world eaters. Yeah, you want to blow up my rhino? Please do.
please.
I give you points. So,
Yeah, exactly.
but other than that, yeah, it's. I will say a really great list is the Impulsor Spam with Sword Bros. It's inexpensive. If they die, it's okay.
Yep,
They're also assault transports, so maybe they'll take a play from that and allow Black Templars to lean into that assault style transport gameplay, which would be if they did that. Yeah, tough stuff in a Land Raider with a bunch of Crusader squads, just taking an objective on turn one or turn two. That would be awesome and very
yep,
fluffy.
yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've loved the being able to run impulsors, with sword bros in them. Like it just feels so iconic. Like the way in the old days where we used to run like the Rhino Rush, where you'd have 3 or 4 rhinos with dudes in them, and you just push forward. And um, speaking of the Rhino, it looks pretty good. It's tough 9. It regains a wound automatically every turn. That's pretty dope. If it doesn't have a
Yep.
transport restriction, we'll be able to stuff, Primaris in there too. Would be interesting. I'll have to get out my old rhinos. So,
Yep.
yeah, I agree, Stephen. Land Raiders are iconic. GW will never get rid of them, which is what I was wondering, because we'd heard for the longest time rumors about, um, you know, uh, the uh, Primaris Terminators, right? And I'm like, how are they going to replace such an iconic unit? Well, it turns out they're not. It's the same unit. They're just now saying,
Yeah.
hey, they could be Primaris or Firstborn, and they buffed them up and made the models bigger, which I think made a lot of people happy. I'll be buying some more for sure, because I want the cool, dope new models. So I'm sure we'll see a assault variant as well, which will be awesome for us. So we'll just have to kind of see what comes of it. But I think something like that. I don't know if they'll release a new kit. I mean, yeah, the Land Raider kit is technically getting older, but honestly, it's still a very nice kit. It's not really showing its age yet, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, makes me think of a question. What if we had our own combat patrol, a new 10th edition combat patrol? What would be your wish in that box?
oh boy. Um, well, I would probably put, and I don't know if this adds up to like points wise what GW wants to do or whatever, but I think a Primaris Crusader squad, a Sword Bro squad,
Mm,
which technically gives you a character as well if you want. Um, Probably either a chaplain or our marshal model. Um, and then either like a Brutalis Dread or an Impulsor, I think is what I'd like to see.
yeah,
Um, you know, I could go either way on that. Both of them would be good, and both of them make sense for us because you can stuff the Impulsor full of dudes and drive forward. Um, or the Brutalis Dread. I mean, it fits us. There's
yeah,
we have a long history of melee only dreads. There was an option way back in like third or fourth edition. It was called a Durandal dread, and there's an art picture of it in our fourth edition codex of this two-handed, two melee armed box dreadnought just tearing stuff up. so, so yeah,
yeah.
either one of those I think would be good. What would you want?
Crusader squad for sure. Yeah, I think the example is in the current combat patrol, and I think it's a really good value. Yeah, that's got to be a must because that's part of our army. And that's the you on the Brutalis Red. I can foresee them. It'd be fun to speculate on this, but I see them having like a Brutalis Dread in our combat patrol box. Iron Hands gets the inevitable long range dread, and then maybe like Space somebody else gets the Redemptor dread. So like having a thematic dread with each of these combat boxes,
Yeah.
um, some sort of transport. Yeah, I think that would be a must as well.
Yeah, I had to watch that trailer like two or three times to confirm that that was in fact a Redemptor chassis that Hellfire Dread
Yeah,
was on, which is pretty cool. It'll be interesting to see what kind of rules it gets. So, Bob says one thing that's interesting, there hasn't been anything stated yet on what kinds of missions we'll be seeing in 10th. The last two editions, we knew at least basics months in advance. Yeah, that will be interesting. You know,
yeah,
I think for me, I hope that they do keep a similar formula to what we have now. You could tidy it up a little bit and make it a little bit more streamlined, but I do like the format where you got to play the mission. Um, One thing that I really appreciated that
yes,
they got rid of in ninth was you can't win the game by tabling your opponent because to me that just promotes bad behavior from players, where they build an army to just ignore all the things and just kill as much as possible as fast as possible. And I hate that style of play. I don't think that that's a very sportsmanlike way to play. I think that that was one thing I really loved, and that you have to play the mission. And even if you table your opponent, you can still lose on points, which is hilarious to me.
yeah,
So yeah, I hope they keep that kind of style of play. That's something that eighth and ninth have been amazing because I remember in past editions, it was objectives based, winning the game, or tabling your opponent, but you didn't score those objectives until the end of the game. So it didn't matter whether you were on it all game or not. If you got knocked off in the last turn, you were no longer on that objective. So hopefully they keep something similar to what we have now, because I think it works really well.
agree. It's one of the first lessons I learned as a new player to this, and what give all other new players to really get better at this. So you just in general, if you want to get better at this game, learn to play the mission.
Hmm.
It's the games that I win and win soundly, or the events that I win. It's because I leaned into the mission and didn't worry about tabling the opponent or being tabled. In fact, one of the videos you guys had talked about a couple times early in your channel is I had won games and had nothing on the table, and it's true. I found myself in that position twice where I won a game, I had nothing on the table at the round five. Where I'd like, and so I think I'm with you. I think the missions they've done a great job over the past year of me playing, tightening up these missions and making them better. Where I think there's two clear opportunities is for one on secondary. I want to make sure that the secondaries are engaging. There shouldn't be a the back and get 15 points. That
Yeah.
should not be a thing. I think that's got to go. And I've completely lost the second point. I'm sure it'll come up, but as long as they keep those engaging missions, I think that'll be a really healthy thing for the game.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to have engaging secondaries. You can't have ones that are just auto includes because I'm going to do this thing
Oh,
once and then just score for the rest of the game and auto get
I,
15 points.
what I think needs to be addressed directly. I just saw the other point is the power of going second. Like I'm now positioned that if I go first, I'm fine. I'm comfortable with it. I still feel like I can win consistently, but there is a real power going second in the current mission packs. It's been for the past year that I've been playing. Going second, and then that's of course at the end of the game, if you were the second player, it's a very powerful synergy you can actually lean into.
Yeah.
I think it gives almost too much of an advantage. It's a little bit balanced towards the second turn or second player. I'd like to see that addressed in some form or fashion.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of for a long time people were like, "Oh, go first has a huge advantage." I never ever really felt like going first had a huge advantage, because you're basically trying to predict what your opponent's going to do, and having to put yourself out there in the middle of the board sometimes, gives them something to do on turn one where you might have any not have any shots to shoot at something turn one. Um, so yeah, so I think you know, the thing about like going first or going second, something that I would like to see in 40K, but I don't know how to achieve it specifically, is something they do in Infinity. Infinity, the boards are not set up equal. They're not set up to be symmetrical like 40K is. And the person who wins the role to decide, you know, uh, first turn and stuff like that, that person can choose basically ball or field, like football, right? Do you want the ball? Do you want to go first? Or do you want to choose deployment? And so you can choose the more advantageous deployment thing. Your opponent deploys before you, and so then you can deploy accordingly. And then you go second. So I think that something like that could really help 40K, where there is a tactical decision to be made. Do I want to go first? Or do I want the better deployment zone? Um, the only downside to that is that with units that like can infiltrate and deploy up the board, um, you can really like make more of an alpha strike. And if you don't get it, whereas now you still have to be cautious with your infiltrating units, because if you're too bold and you don't go first, whatever that thing is dead, right? So,
Yeah,
it's going to be challenging to balance that. The reason it works in Infinity is because it doesn't matter how good your one model is. He can still get taken off the table by a model that's like a tenth of his points. So there's a lot of parity in there, and that's why like if you try to Rambo one dude up the table, you're gonna end up, and also the dudes that can infiltrate in Infinity are typically not like big bruisers, that can deal tons of damage. So they're more light infantry and skirmisher types things. So it would be cool if they could figure out a way to do that to balance it for 40K, but I don't know if it's possible or not. So just having some sort of a balance. Honestly, I prefer to go second most of the time anyway, just because it allows me to you know, sort of bait my opponent to come to the middle where I want to fight, and it makes it easier for me to make decisions.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with going first or second. I do feel like second is an advantage, and even when I get second, I feel well. There's a good chance I'm going to win this now. And we can talk a little bit because Bob's asking about the
Yeah,
actually about this, but I think you needed to first off your prep for a game should focus on the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, I'm going first,
yeah,
and against an army that can outfit me. So that's a worst case scenario for us. So I tend to pick secondaries that are scored at the end of your turn. So that takes away the ability for my opponent to deny me points. So that's why I'll go through and leaf the book and look at the phrasing. This one scores at the end of my turn, not the end of the round. That's an important distinction. And then what Bob is hinting at us to dive into here is the deployment. So with my mentality on how I deploy and how I lose games as well as if I deploy poorly, is I'll deploy with my secondaries in mind. And then if I will also deploy with the assumption that I'm going to go first. I'm going to deploy with the assumption I'm going to go first. If I get second, great. That's just more points for me, in my opinion. So what I'll do is I will typically deploy to not don't get shot off the board turn one. So castling is incredibly important. Learn how to castle. I know you guys have a great video on it talking about it a little bit. Please check that out. But also, I'll deploy in a way that I'm going to go for second, or first, doesn't matter. I'm going to stage for turn two. So Bob and I have been wanting to talk about this on the video. But staging for turn two is also critically important too, because if I can stage correctly and they go first, they're like, "Oh, we've done such a great job of deployment. I have nothing to do but to inch forward." And then on turn two, that's when you start to lean into your gameplay, especially if you're a shooting style army, and start just unfolding your plan right there on stage on turn two.
yeah, absolutely. Because if you're out of position on turn one, the unit that you want to do a thing on turn two may not be able to. So you got to make sure that you're deploying where you want these units to go, and not just because it's the optimal place to hide a unit or something like that. You still got to be cognizant of where do I want this unit on turn two, and can I get there?
Yep. And ask good questions of the opponent too. Was what's your biggest threat range? Where's the biggest? How far can you shoot if you move? Okay, if you move here, can you shoot here? What's your biggest threat range on charges? Evil Sun orcs, they can pretty much go up the entire board. Think about the worst
Tyranids
case
too.
scenario and ask the opponent. Just, yep, yeah, Tyranids especially. Yep. As for the worst case scenario, deploy based on that and be defensive. And if you get turn two, great. If you don't, you're already set up. You're fine. You're not worried about them shooting you off the board. And then keep in mind staging your stuff. Like my favorite unit is my heavy eradicator. So I always bring four models total. So I'll have strategically in a place where there's going to be a shooting lane, or the rest of the army. I'll try to deploy so I can funnel them or try to bait them into funneling their own army into this lane. And on their turn, if they get first, they realize they can't shoot everything off the board. They'll go into that funnel trap. And then on their fight phase, I'm spending a CP to devout push my eradicators outside the wall. And they're like, uh-oh, this is going to suck.
Yep.
So those kind of things are really important.
It's like, hello, here I am. Devout push is such a
And I'm stationary.
great strategy. Yeah, and I'm stationary. It's such a great stratagem. It's so flexible, which is what's awesome. So, yeah, you gotta make sure that you're considering all the factors that are gonna occur, and what your game plan is, right? So when I recently, I went up to the mountains last month, and we have like me and my friends have this like 40K weekend where we just play 40K games all day, every day. And the one of the games where I really like, I had some close matches, but One of them, where I just ran away with the game, was I really had a great game plan in mind. I was playing my friend Brad on his Chaos Knights, and um, my game plan was, whether I went first or second, was to try to trap him in his deployment zone, to rush forward as far forward as I could with all of my stuff, and keep him on his side of the board. And I was probably a little too aggressive with my Invictor, um, but it's a 140 point unit. It's bait to me. Like it's a distraction Carnifex. And I ended up going first, which meant that the Invictor was in his deployment zone, charging a War Dog on turn one. And then my Vanguard vets were also there. They jumped from one piece of terrain to the other, and then, you know, the the other thing was is he was trying to stand on objectives, um, but he was trying to do like actions and things like that. There's an action that he has to do when he's on an objective, but he can't do anything else when he does it to score points. And he ended up doing that with the front knight because he wanted the back knight to shoot. And that held them up standing there for a whole turn while I'm still pushing forward with everything. Um, and I ended up winning that game like 90 something to 50 something. So I basically kept him in his deployment zone the entire game, until the very last like turn or two. He was finally able to come over to my side. But yeah, having a game plan going in and saying, what is my strategy to win is really important, and knowing, what's going to be detrimental to your opponent, like keeping knights in their deployment zone, is definitely crucial.
Yeah. No, you touched on something I think it's probably one of the most important things about doing well at events, especially if you want to increase your and get to a point where you're consistent. Prep. I spend a lot of time prepping too. Like I've got a notebook and I'll go through. Okay, these are the missions that we'll probably be playing. We usually have them ahead of time, especially for grand tournaments. These are what we're going to be playing, and I'll do like an if-then statement scenario. Like if I'm playing knights, this is what I'm taking. This if I'm playing a horde army, this is what these are the secondaries. This is how I'm going to deploy. Like going to deploy like this, and I stick to that gameplay. Early on when I first played, I fell into that net list trap. I just listed a good list. I did a world I thought looked cool. That was my first Atlantic City, but I went in there and 90% of the players, especially at a large event, do the same thing. They net list or they create a list that they want to play because they genuinely wanted to play those models. They'll put them on the table and they'll just kind of watch the dice roll. They don't necessarily go in with a gameplay. So you're going to clear through the lower and lower mid tables very quickly because that's the way many players play. But what separates the mid tables, especially from the top to the top tables, that ceiling is the prep those players into it. There's a good player of mine, Derek Apshe. Him and I played, and we streamed. Or he put it on his videos. He's one of the top Grey Knight players out of Philadelphia. He won the grand tournament that we had hosted here in Eastern PA back in February. He's been consistently with different armies, and the thing that Derek does better than almost any other player that I know is that prep. He goes in with a game plan, and he sticks to it. He doesn't deviate too far off of it, and he wins consistently because of it. And he's one of the top players.
Yeah. It's crucial to know to not just be like, well, I guess I'm gonna wing it. Like, that's not gonna win you games. You gotta know your army well too. Like, if you're planning to take a list to a tournament, don't let that be the first time you play that game, or even the fifth time that you play that list. You need to play like, 10 or 15 games with a list, realistically, before you take it to a tournament, to fine tune not only the list and to be like, this wasn't really working. Let's tweak it to this gun instead. And play several games with it before you make major changes as well, because maybe bad
Yep.
dice rolls killed off that unit, but the next game it survives and does great. So you got to like account for variances like that, and make sure that, one, you're comfortable with your list, you know what your units are going to do, what they're capable of, what their average damage output's going to be. Um, these are all important things to think about so that you can, know all right, if I rush my van vets into that squad, I'm probably going to kill them. Or they're going to struggle to kill that thing. I wasn't expecting my van vet squad to kill my friend's knight, even with the Fist of Balthus. But what I expected them to do was die heroically, tying them up for a turn or two, which they ended up killing the knight. So, dice went my way, but I mean, I knew I was going to deal damage. I didn't think I would deal as much damage as I did. And honestly, people have talked about, are storm shields worth it on Van Vets? Yes, because that's what kept them alive to swing a second turn and kill that knight. Um, so, um, so yeah. So knowing your list and knowing how to play your list and tweaking it,
Yeah.
over time to be better is definitely a crucial part. Um, Grand
Yeah,
Enforcer
you
says,
touched on something I think it's just as
I was just gonna say, answering
just real
Grand,
quick. You touched on something that's just as
yeah,
important.
yeah, go for
Sorry.
it.
Something really important is not just a prep, but at the end when you're done with your game, be sure to debrief and take notes. Don't just as you said there, don't knee jerk to changing your list because it didn't work out.
Right.
Take good notes and find out what did not work. Just lean into it.
Yeah.
Debriefing is just as important as prep.
Yep. Yep. What worked well, what didn't? What was the thing that didn't work well? Was that because of bad dice, or did it just not do what it was supposed to, or not do as much damage as you had hoped it would? Um, So yeah, answer Enforcer's question real quick. Can the Invictor be deployed outside your deployment zone? Yes, it has concealed positions just like infiltrators and incursors do. So you can deploy it outside your deployment zone. And with a 10-inch move, if you go first and you deploy it in the right spot, you're probably charging something. But you got to be careful again because you don't want to stick it out in the open because it's not super durable. It's only tough six. It's got 13 wounds, but it doesn't have the -1 damage of dreadnoughts, so it's going to go down fast if you leave it out in the open. Um, my In my game, I put it behind terrain, and a war dog would have been able to get to it had he gone first, but then that war dog would have been bait to or would have been killed by my van vets coming up behind. So I deployed it aggressively. You could say it was too aggressive, but the way I treat the Invictor is it's another concealed position unit. It only costs 140 points, and it's a distraction carnifex. Or a popcorn unit is what I call it. It's a unit that I can afford to lose that you can't afford to ignore because it'll deal a bunch of damage to you. So,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, that's how I use it in that list.
Yeah, those forward deploys are going to be critically important on the tail end of ninth. I know we only have a few more months left, but since we don't have Codex, the 15 points, we're pretty much auto taking banners and oath for the most part. We need some sort of third category. And I think what we can lean into and what I plan on leaning into is those forward units to try to get behind enemy lines and engage alt in all fronts to
Mhm.
at least guarantee myself 12. So I think that's something that is going to be really important, the later end of this ninth edition meta for Black Templars.
The list I've been running,
I don't know if I did Invictus. Those are fun, but I don't know. I
yeah,
think they're too fragile for me.
yeah, it depends on your list. So the list I've been running the most, which I ran mostly at the mountain games, is my trade list, and it works well in there because it's a trade unit. It punches above its points value, and if it dies, whatever. Like, and I usually take shock tactics with that list because I don't expect the small 5-man squads to live very long sitting on an objective. And so when you take that objective back, and I come back in with something else to kill you, now I've got shock tactics easily. So I think I max shock tactics in just about every game I've used that with. So yeah, and then oaths because oaths is just, I mean, it's so good. I've yet to fail to max that
Yeah.
every game. Um, so yeah, Stumble Bunny
Another one that's so
asks,
powerful too.
yeah, yeah. Stumble Bunny asks, how do you prefer to split up your Sword Brethren squads? So I run a 10-man, obviously. You should, if you're gonna take them in two squads, always make one squad instead. And the reason is they have combat squads, so you can split them up however you like. I've talked about this in previous videos, but I always put the two Thunderhammers. I run. Uh, I think Casey from our server calls it full Gucci. All the gear. So I have two Thunderhammers, two Lightning Claws, four Pyro Pistols, and two Plasma Pistols. So what I do, and my squad has the Holy Orb on it too. So the Thunderhammers and the Lightning Claws both have Pyro Pistols. Um, because I want them to live the longest anyway, and then that continues to allow me to have those shots, for the longest. And then I put the Thunderhammers and the two plasma pistols and a basic sword dude in one impulsor with the Judiciar along with the Holy Orb. Or no, sorry, the orb goes with the other squad. And then I put the Lightning Claws and the other three dudes and the guy with the Holy Orb in the one with Helbrecht. And the reason I do that is number one, Helbrecht has a ton of high damage, high strength attacks anyway. So he can pick up any slack there. Um, but the Lightning Claws benefit a lot more from his +1 strength than the Thunderhammers do. Being strength 5 instead of strength 4 is a huge buff for them. Um, so, um, so yeah, so that's where, and the Holy Orb goes with there, so they have a fight's last ability. The Judiciar already has it, so he just uses his own thing, and he's got a decent sword as well. But then you've got the Thunderhammers on top of that, and the Plasma Pistols, for some extra shots. So the Plasma Pistols really go wherever. It doesn't. You could put them in with Helbrecht, and I have done that. It just depends on what you're feeling that game. So.
You're talking about something that almost could be another video in itself. There's two things off on arcs right now: is combat squads and strategic reserve. And yeah, you're really leaning into that. So yeah,
Yeah.
you said it perfectly. Split it based on what you see. You're
Yeah.
allowed to.
Yep. Which is awesome, and that's one reason why I like um, running a 10 man, because if you just take two 5 mans, you got one of each weapon. You can only, you're limited by that. But if you take a 10 man, you can split them up however you like, which makes it really versatile.
Yep.
And you decide that at game time. So you see your opponent's list and you be like, you know what? I'm gonna put all the good stuff in one thing. Or no, I want to split them up how I've been splitting them up. Um, just depends on what you want to do. Sometimes too, I'll start Helpworked outside the impulsor, because then if I like go second and they come to the middle, I can be like Van Vet Squad have Chapter Master rerolls, and then I hop in and drive off. you know,
Yep.
uh, Make use of that turn one. So because he's not going to be able to be shot. I mean, you're castled up behind stuff, even if the impulsor were to be killed somehow, there's still a whole bunch of other infantry units around. He's not going to be able to, he's not in any danger.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's how I prefer to split them up. Hopefully we'll be able to do the same thing in 10th edition, um, because I really like that way of doing it. It kind of lets you specialize each squad a little bit, get a little bit of each. Some anti-tank, some infantry stuff. Um, what's really uh, um, what's really going to be spicy, I think, is so I imagine a chapter master will be the same as a captain as far as attaching both a lieutenant and a chapter master to a squad. So having like Helbrecht and a Castellan with a Swordbro squad sounds really juicy, because you're going to get those auto
It's so
wounds.
juicy.
Whatever Helbrecht gives them, it's going to be mean. I think using characters in uh, 10th is going to be more about only attaching them to small squads if that squad is very durable, like a Terminator squad or something. Um, because you're not gonna put a lieutenant with intercessors, because they're too easy to kill, and then he's a sitting duck, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think that'll be an interesting new dynamic that we're going to have to adapt to because, well, in previous editions you could attach characters to squads. They could also detach and go attach to somebody else in the middle of the game. It doesn't sound like we'll be able to do that. It sounds like they are permanently part of this squad for the whole game, and then if the squad dies, now he's just running around by himself, hoping not to get shot off the board. So that'll be an interesting thing to have to adapt to. That's definitely one of the biggest changes that I've noticed as far as how characters work for 10th. So it'll be interesting. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I think it's too early to tell. I'm thinking of not just right now. You're thinking of a lot of offensive ones, but as you're speaking, I'm thinking of some of the more force multiplier characters or the tough ones like
Chaplains. Yeah.
Grimaldus. Like, how's
Yeah.
Grimaldus going to work? Grimaldus is a staple of every single one of my lists and has been since I started. How am I going to? And because he is such an important and powerful force multiplier, any chaplain actually, not
Yeah.
just Grimaldus. So how they allow us to still include them and have the power of army-wide buffs, but also being attached to a. And so I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah.
that's going to look like. So I'm really curious to see how they flush
And
that
I
out.
don't know if we're going to have
Because that's
like
also a big part of our identity.
big army wide buffs like that, like we have now, where Grimaldus has a big, huge fat
Yeah, I don't
aura.
think so either.
They've said that most auras are going away and being replaced by like targeted. This one unit will get this thing. Um,
Yeah,
which brings like a whole nother layer of strategy to which characters do I attach to which units? What's going to be optimal as far as um, what buffs they provide. I think lieutenants providing auto wounds is a huge buff to what they currently do. And if we're still allowed to take two in a slot, we may see, you know, uh, lieutenants making a resurgent because auto wounding is pretty powerful. I mean, firsthand, you use Gene Route Might all the time. Fishing for those sixes
yeah,
is a thing, and it works. So having that mechanic just baked in for free is going to be definitely very powerful. Bob says,
yeah.
"What
I
do you
think my
feel?"
my wish list.
Go ahead. What's your wish list?
Oh, Grimald's the Primaris Crusader squad. It's fluffy. It works. I think
Yeah,
that's going to be my wish list for the detachments.
yeah. I think we'll see it. I don't think they'll, because if Grimaldus couldn't attach to something because of his servitors, it would be a huge nerf. Um, because he'll be a sitting duck. So I'm sure he'll be able to attach to something, and in Crusader squads makes sense. So Bob wants to know, what do you feel is our worst matchup after the balanced data slate, and what would you do to win? That's definitely a question for you because I don't play enough games to to really look at that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Even as I saw him write that, I was sitting there thinking, like, what is a really bad match? I think I still struggle with the Jakari, like the elf, because of in that fog war and how quickly they are. And so I'll kind of answer it with two ideas. Is for one, the unknown with those guys and just how quick they can get across the board and do a lot of damage. But also, I think not. I don't necessarily struggle with this, but I do know a lot of Black Templars struggle with shooty lists, like a good Tau list, especially now that swords are the suits now have again. They're going to struggle even more so, or guard, or Votan, which I think is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful. And so that you're going to see that, especially Tau, start to make a resurgence. I also believe that Tyranids. I think this is something that's just not talked about enough. Is Tyranids, they backpedaled on some of their nerfs, and now with the new data slate,
Yep.
they're a very significant boost. And I'm telling you right now, one of my good buddies of mine, he plays me really well. He's a very strong player. He's been playing for 20 years. He's a very powerful behemoth list. It's all about denying points. And now that they've backpedaled all his things that they took away and put those back in, I think that's a very, very powerful list that I think Black Templars are going to be worried about. And
Yeah.
then, would you do to win? Here's my broad general answer is I'll go back and say is you still need to go in with some sort of game plan and stick to it. So I'm not going to change a thing. I'm sticking to my game plan that created where my gameplay might adapt based on the bad matchup, so to speak. Is I'll get better at staging. You know, we talked about deployment, and that's an important piece, but staging is as equally important for your deployment. What I mean by that is, what are you going to do if you get first turn against a very bad matchup that you're genuinely worried about? It's too fast. It's going to outshoot me, or it's going to take away all my objectives because it's a good NIDS list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on staging for that second turn. How can I get them to funnel? How can I bait some of their models out? Or how can I get myself in a position where I can get them to shift their focus on one objective and then I can take another? That staging piece is really, really critically important.
Yeah, and again, that feeds back into knowing your army and what you're capable of, and what, you know, theoretically, you should have an idea of your damage output of what you expect from a unit. Like if I shoot my Gladiator Valiant at something, do I expect it to die in one volley? Do I expect it to take two volleys? What's the average, you know, what's the average dice roll on that? And then, not only that, but you got to account for bad dice. Do I need to try to overkill something to make sure that it dies because of bad dice? Um, and that's when I'm picking targets. That's something that I'm always thinking about. It's like, okay, well, this thing can shoot that, and this thing can shoot that, and this thing can shoot that, and I need that thing to die. So I'm going to take the one that I think I can, maybe if I roll hot, I'll kill it, and then see what happens. And if I don't kill it, all right, I'm going to
Yeah.
take this next unit and I'm going to shoot at it. Okay, that killed it. Cool. Now this other unit can go shoot at this unit over here instead, and have backups for when I'm going to shoot or when I'm going to charge. What are the things that, um, what are my options? And, is this an option to go into this one and that one? Cool. So, what's my preferred target? And, then do I need this as a backup? Knowing those kind of
Yeah.
things, knowing the capability of your units is going to be crucial into being able to pick those targets and pick what you're able to shoot at, because that's going to determine how successful you are. We all know what the average should be, but you got to account for bad dice, and focus on the fact that they may roll hot, you may not roll hot. Uh, you know, it could go either way. Perfect example, the first time I ran the trade list, my Gladiator Valiant shot once, like killed like a couple of Eldar bikes, and then died and did nothing. But in the game with the Knights, it blew a War Dog off the table in a single volley. So, stuff like that, it happens. Hot dice, bad dice happen, and you got to account for variables and have a backup plan. You can't be like, this thing is going to kill them, because it might not, right? So you got to have something else that can
Yeah.
plink off those last few wounds if you need to.
And we're talking about a lot of killing the other opponent um, strategies here. I think one of the other things, and if I back up and set and kind of re-answer a little bit, one of the most one of the best things that ever happened for my own gameplay, what elevated me was scoring, like literally physically scoring. And I even went from digital. I went from not knowing how to score consistently or quickly, so I let the other player score, to finally saying, you know what, I'm going to learn how to score a game. And so I was using a digital platform, and then I've moved on from the digital platform, that, despite how great they are, to a physical piece of paper. And I found that it was really, really advantageous for me, because if I was going against an army that I just don't know enough about, my question was, how do you score? What are your secondaries? What are you taking, and how do you get those points? Especially if there's exclusive faction ones that are kind of quirky. I might not know anything about your army, but I know how you're going to try to score. And so if you're going to, and I'm also keeping track myself, so it's in front. So every turn, my turn, their turn, my turn. I'm looking at the scoreboard and saying, okay, what do I need to score points? What do I need to do to deny points? This is what they're trying to do, and I stage based on that. So I think that's an important element for any army that you feel like that we're going to be on the back foot because of the data slate.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to know how your opponent is trying to score and how you can stop that because, even if you're like, well, I can't necessarily get to this point to score this thing that I want to, but I can stop my opponent from scoring over here, that's still points in your favor, right? That's going to be a swing in your favor
Yep.
if you can prevent them from scoring points. Um, you know, so um, so yeah, you gotta know what your game plan is as far as like how am I gonna achieve my objectives? How am I gonna achieve the secondaries? How am I gonna achieve the primaries? So that way you can really focus on that because like you said, we've talked about a lot about killing stuff, but that's not how you're gonna win the game. I mean, you're gonna have to kill some stuff, but you got to score points,
Yeah.
and you got to play the mission. Always focus on the mission. Never lose sight of the mission. That's the number one trap. Is like especially when like dice are hot and they're going your way, and you're like, or you're tilting because something bad happened, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get revenge. I'm gonna go kill that thing, but that killing that thing doesn't help you. Standing over here doing nothing on an objective helps you, right? Don't lose sight of that.
Yep.
Don't get frustrated by bad dice or by good dice on your opponent's side. Focus on the mission and don't worry about sometimes there's just stuff you can't do anything about. Your opponent's going to do whatever, and you got to make sure that you're focusing on your objectives and scoring points or denying your opponent points because that's what's ultimately going to win you the game.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so yeah, so we got about 15 minutes left. Anyone watching in the chat, type in if you got questions or comments or thoughts on stuff that we've talked about. Now's a great time to pop them in there. Um, also, didn't do this at the beginning of the stream, but definitely want to give a shout out to our partner, Baron of Dice. We were talking about this before the stream. We've got dice back in stock. So definitely check those out. We also are very soon going to be getting our Patreon exclusive dice, and they're going to be really cool. So I can't wait to show those off to you guys. They are exclusive to patrons, so only patrons will be able to purchase them. So if you're interested in joining our Patreon, we've got a lot of great benefits. Check it out in the description. There's a link there. And of course, thank you to all of our patrons who support us, as including you. We really appreciate it. We couldn't do this without you guys. So yeah. So check out baronofdice.com to pick up some implausible nature dice, and don't forget to use discount code IN40K so you can get a discount on your purchase. Ryan says, "Will we be able to see the
And
Patreon
there's
dice if we aren't one?" Yes, I am definitely going to be showing them off so you can see what they look like and decide if that's something you want to you want to join our Patreon to get access to them. Yeah, uh, they're gonna be square corner, of course, as Bob says. Be careful with round corner dice; they don't roll as well. Um, they'll be square corner, just like our other dice, and they're gonna be sweet. I can't wait to show you guys. So as soon as they're available, we're probably gonna either show them off on a live stream or show them off on a video once I get them in hand. And we get some nice pictures of them. We'll show you guys. So stay tuned for that.
yeah.
So
I'll throw in a commercial from a competitive standpoint. If you're not using Square Core, you're losing. In seriousness, it's if you're, especially if you're using a large model list like I do. I have very large Crusader squads. I need every second, and I do not need to sit there and watch a rounded corner sit there and spin for 5 seconds.
yeah,
I don't need it in my life. So
no,
I switched it to square corner dice into a mat on it. I'll never go back. Speeds up your game.
yeah, yeah. Something else too. I always but get some kind of a dice tray because a lot of places are using the neoprene mats now. I hate the way dice roll on neoprene mats. I feel like they always roll terribly for me. Get a dice tray, and you'll be much better off. Um, so
Yep.
um, Oh, Bob was saying, yeah. So if you
Oh,
go and look at our
God.
dice, there is two options now. There you can buy them in round corner dice. Our partner Baron of Dice had a manufacturing error where those were supposed to be sisters dice. They use the same swirl pattern as ours, but they got engraved with our logo. So if you want round corner dice, maybe you just like the way they look. I don't know. Maybe you like rolling more ones. You can purchase them. Just make sure they should default to the square corner dice when you go to the website. We made sure that because we don't want people buying them because that's what the image is. We don't want people buying them thinking they were getting square corner and they got round corner by mistake because they weren't paying attention. So you can buy the round corner dice if you want to, um, but we do have plenty of the square corner as well, and of course our Patreon dice will be square corner. Um, so yeah, are we willing to comment about the next implausible nature painting contest? That's a Bob question. Bob handles that. So if Bob wants to comment on that, I don't think we've really set anything in stone yet. But Bob handles most of that stuff. So I'll let him respond in the chat. Um, but yeah, there you go. There's Bob. Stumble Bunny asks, is it viable to bring bikes in BT? I love the way Outriders and ATVs look. Bringing them the last few matches, but it's not gone well. So if you're trying to like play in tournaments and play, as optimally competitively as possible, no. The points drop was welcome for them, but being a three-man squad and just not having enough attacks and not having the sergeant have any weapons really options to speak of is what's really hurting them. If we could take them in like 5 or 6 man squads, and the sergeant could take some kind of a power weapon, I think they'd absolutely be viable. But we just don't buff them enough to do anything. So,
If
so
it,
yeah,
and I'll say this: if you stumble upon, if you like bikes, look into running attack bikes. I ran attack bikes for a majority of the year, actually, and for a couple different reasons here. You have enough wounds, enough toughness to be really annoying. I think there are 4 wounds, tough 5, I think. And that 4 wound especially can really throw people off guard. Now they've got free Melta. They move up the board very quickly, and if you have for me, I also run an apothecary warlord time, and what's unique about attack bikes is you can heal them and bring back a model if you decide to put 3 together. So that can create some really cool synergies. My problem was, again, and it's actually competitive, so it's a really good unit to bring at 50 points a model. My problem was traffic jams. The only reason I don't run them now is because tornadoes do the same thing, a little bit more points. They're tougher, they have more wounds, they have more range,
they
and they don't create the
fly.
traffic jams that I was getting. They fly, so
Yeah,
it's kind of a go-to. That said, back to what Stumble Bunny, what you want to do, I think you can look at the attack bikes. If you like that kind of model, those are very good and they're very competitive.
yeah, I think they're better than ATVs. The ATV
They are.
is just too expensive. Like it's durable, which is great, but
You can't.
it has the same firepower essentially as an attack bike for more points. Like I'd rather have more shots. Volume of fire is king in ninth edition. So I mean, perfect example of that. Look at intercessors with the 3 bolt rifle types. The assault bolt rifle or hellblasters. The assault version wins every single time. So, it's one of those things that volume of fire is king, and I'd rather have 2 attack bikes than 1 ATV, which is approximately the
Yeah.
same points. I think the 2 attack bikes is a little bit more, um, but yeah. So unfortunately, no. I mean, we'll wait and see what 10th brings. I've got 6 Outriders that are sitting on my shelf from Indomitus that I would love to, because they look great. I would love to be able to field them. So we'll see what they do in 10th. Who knows? In 10th edition, they might be a viable thing for us. Um, so, um,
And
so yeah.
a
Grand
good combination of
Enforcer.
questions there between Grant and Fox and Bob.
Yeah, I know, right? Grand Enforcer asks, is it better to put Champion of Feast on a Sword Brother with Thunderhammer or an Aggressor Sergeant with his gauntlets? So, for me, I'm probably
I have
running.
my answer. I'll let you go with yours.
Yeah, for me, I'm probably running my Sword Brethren with Helbert. So they already have a beat stick, high damage thing, and Helbert can give them full rerolls and rerolls to 1 innately. Um, so I think in that case, it's probably better on the aggressor, um, because they're not going to be buffed by the same type of character. Um, what's your thought?
Neither. Don't use the CP. Arcs Arcs CP is a huge premium, especially late game. And there has been many instances where I leaned too much into a CP heavy list where I'm like, I really wish I had the CP now. The economy right now where we do get more CP than we did in Nephilim, but it's still premium either way. So I try to start the game 3 CP. I was my last event I did 2 CP and I was comfortable, but I still wish I had a third CP. And so my current list now runs 3 CP at the start, and I think that's kind of like the perfect amount for me. And that gives me a warlord trait, it gives me a key relic, and one of the third CP for either an extra warlord trait or another relic somewhere else. I can't justify the CP spent on Champions of the Feast. No matter it is very good, not just on the offensive piece, but you're also giving your an extra wound. And if you're running an apothecary warlord, that's a real great bonus there.
Yeah.
But I just can't justify it right now.
I think it depends on your list. If your list includes sword bros and aggressors, and those are really the only two good targets for it, I would either consider leaving it at home, or like you do, or I would take, if you're taking Sword of Judgment on one of those sword bros, put it on him. Would be very good. I run it on my Fist of Balthus Vanguard vet sergeant in my trade list, and the Sword of Judgment is on the other guy, is on the other sergeant. So it's done very well for me because he punches really hard. Like we talked about, I took down a knight with him basically almost single-handedly, um, and
So
it's
here's my challenge then for you. So when you punch down that knight, do you think you overkilled it?
oh, I totally overkilled it. Because it had seven
So
wounds
so why
left,
spend
and
this?
I did like 13 wounds. Um, so, but I mean, part of that was I had rerolls to hit, and I had +1 to wound. So those buffs definitely helped. Um, so yeah, I mean, but there's also been times when like I didn't roll as well, and I needed those hitting on twos and that extra attack to bring down a Lehman Russ or something like that. So. Um, Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what your list is, and I don't know that I put it on aggressors to be honest, or really even a Thunderhammer dude. I think your Fist of Althus is a great target for it, or Sword of Judgment in like a fat Crusader blob, like a 20-man Crusader blob, because you're going to be able to protect him for a lot longer. Um, so, um, so yeah,
I'll
so
tell
yeah.
you, I'll tell you a cheesy, a fun synergy that I ran for the longest time, and actually I felt it was very competitive. I actually ran a feast and a Crux Obsidian on the sergeant of my Eradicators. The intention of that was to make them ultra durable, and they were always escorted by the apothecary. And I would actually take the damage on the sergeant. I know we talked about this; he didn't like the idea, but I would actually take the damage on the sergeant because 1 CP to give him a 2 up save if the damage was only
Yeah.
2, because it could just reduce by to 1 as with the Crux. He had the extra wounds to absorb much of the attacks, and if it killed him, that's okay. The overflow would kill him, maybe wound another eradicator. Apothecary just heals up the eradicator and brings the sergeant back on the next turn. I used to do that quite a bit with a lot of success.
Yeah, I know I've talked about this on the channel. I prefer the only time I really put the Crux and the Champion of the Feast on the same guy is Centurions, and that's because it makes
Yeah.
them an odd number of wounds. So take like a Lehman
Yep.
Russ right now, a battle cannon is 3 damage. So if I put it on a regular Crux on a regular guy, it reduces it to 2. You need 2 shots to kill him because they have 3 wounds. If you put it on the sergeant and he's got Champion of the Feast, he's now got 4 wounds. Still only takes 2 shots to kill him. Versus on a centurion, he's got 4 wounds base. He goes to 5. Now it takes 3 shots to kill him instead of 2. So that's the difference on why I don't like doing it on the sergeant, because the sergeant's also your highest damage output guy. Now you said you were using it on eradicators. The sergeant doesn't matter in them.
Yeah. It
So,
doesn't matter. Yeah.
right, the sergeant doesn't matter in them. So on something like that, if you're gonna do that, that works. But if it's on like a melee squad, like a Terminator squad or something like that, I'd only do it with Centurions or Blade Guard. Just for that reason, because you want your highest damage output guy to be alive as much as possible. Um, so so yeah. So last thing here before we sign off, what is your Bob asks, what is your response to Art of Wars ranking us at the bottom of B tier?
Yeah. So I do understand. I've had a privilege of playing players a couple of times now. In fact, the guy who took second at Nova last year was my first matchup, and it was very close. And I learned a lot in that game. I see their line of thinking on how they. I think what they do in their line of thinking when they rank these, they don't just think about the top players and top mid players. I think they look at players as a whole. And I think where Black Templars might struggle is if you look at it as a whole, similar to Gene Stealer Cult, you need a lot of synergies and a lot of pre-planning to work to make that work. There's a lot of moving pieces with our group. We got to get these litanies off. We got to get this synergy started, and then if that train is rolling, do really really well. One failed Canticle of Hate can throw a necessary charge out the window, or it's just a mismatch of your synergies can really just kind of throw your synergies and your game plan out the window very, very quickly, and the whole thing can unravel. And I think that's why they put them in that tier. It's not in the when I look at the A's and the S tiers, those kinds of armies are not just good because their synergies are really strong and they're going to be hyper competitive. They represent certain armies where a newer player, mid tier player, can just put it on the table, and do really well
And
by
do well, yeah.
default. Black Templars can't necessarily do that.
Yeah. You have to know the synergies and the combos a lot better. It's easy to fall into traps with Black Templars of like, oh, I built this unit. It's like, that's not really how we want to run that unit, or that unit's like not super great for us, despite what you might think on the surface just looking at it. Um, so yeah, I can understand that point of view, but at the same time, I think it also sends a bad message to the community because it's like, oh, Black Templars aren't that great when really we are. You just need to, have a little bit more in-depth knowledge of the faction. We're not just a plug and play faction. We've
Yeah,
never been a plug and play faction. So nothing has changed there, um, but yeah. So I think
we
honestly,
lost
in the
lots
hands
of
of a good
default
player,
points.
yeah, I think in the hands of a good player, we're definitely A tier. Um, so Bob says, but
Yeah,
Goonhammer says we're third best win rate for games played. So there you go. Well,
yeah.
all right.
We lost.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying we lost the default points and the 15 points of Codex Warfare, and just like any other good player, what you need to learn to do is adapt. So the next question is how are we going to get the 12 to 15 points back? So we just have to adapt to it. That's all we have to do.
Yep, absolutely. Well, it is just over 11 o'clock, so thank you everyone for joining us today. David, thank you for coming on. Greatly
Thanks for
appreciate it.
having me.
Yeah, and thank you for your support as a Patreon member. If you guys want to check out all our Patreon benefits, don't forget to check out the description. There's a link down there. There's also a link to our Discord in the description. Take a look at that. We have a great community. Lots of folks talking every day about tactics and strategy in 10th edition and all the changes that are coming for us. Um, so, um, so yeah. Until next time, keep on crusading.